weathermapping.com.
I'm analyzing Europe's rainfall for the next 30 days. If you want to see how much rain you're going to get, stick around. If you can't stay for all of today's video, here's a quick summary. The forecast is broken down into three 10-day windows. Then we're going to look at the full 30-day total, and then finally 30-day percentage of normal precipitation. The main story is repeated rainfall from the southern France into the Alps, Italy, Balkans, Greece, while Eastern Europe stays relatively light throughout. By the end of the period, some of the biggest totals are in Western Norway, Western Scotland, Northern Italy, and parts of the Balkans, but the strongest dry anomaly is in Eastern Europe. Hey guys, Fergus here with weathermapping.com, Marcus Weathering product. This is a precipitation forecast using 5 maps. We're going to look at days 1 through 10, 11 through 20, 21 through 30, then the full 30-day total, and then a 30-day percentage of normal precipitation. So we're going to look at both raw rainfall totals in millimeters, and then how those totals compare to what's typical for this time of year. So let's have a quick look at the metrics as per usual. Total precipitation is the full amount of rain added up over a set time period. So if a location gets 12 millimeters one day, 8 the next, then 20 later in that week, all of that gets summed up together. If that adds up to 40 millimeters over 10 days, that's the total precipitation for that time period. Percentage of normal is a little bit different. It tells you how the forecast compares to the historical average for the same place for the same time of year. So if a region normally gets 100 millimeters over a 30-day period, but the forecast is only suggesting 60 millimeters, that's 60% of normal. That means drier than average. If the forecast is 140, that would be 140% of normal, which means it would be wetter than average. The distinction matters because raw totals alone can sometimes be misleading. A wet-looking number in Norway may be normal there because Norway is climatologically wet at this time of year. Meanwhile, a moderate-looking number in Spain or Ukraine can actually be unusually wet for those areas. So the total map tells us where the rain is falling, while the percentage of normal map tells us where the pattern is truly unusual. This makes it useful for agriculture, hydrology, river response, drought monitoring, kind of mountain snowpack, and other items that are related to precipitation. So let's look at the first 10-day period. This is March 20th through 29th, 2026. The dominant setup is a wetter southern and northwestern fringe with a noticeably drier eastern half of Europe. The standout wet area is Western Norway, where totals are pushing upper double digits, locally even up to kind of 95 millimeters. Western and northern Scotland are also quite a bit wet, with many totals 50 to sort of 65 millimeters. Further south, southern Spain shows one of the more active areas in Iberia, which is bad news with all the rains they've had so far this year. Some pockets 50 to 70 millimeters. Another wet corridor stretches from eastern France into Switzerland, northern Italy, Austria, Slovenia, Croatia area, down towards parts of the Balkans and Greece. A lot of that area is running 30 to 50 millimeters, so a meaningful start to the period. By contrast, a large part of northern France, Germany, Poland, the Baltics, Belarus, Western Russia stay lighter. Many of these areas are only 5 to 20 millimeter range, and there's broad areas in Eastern Europe that are barely kind of getting into that double digits. So from the start, the map's already sort of laying out this kind of structure that we're seeing where the far south and the northwest are active, while the east is comparatively dry. In the second 10-day window, the wet signal becomes more consolidated across southern Europe. The axis from southern France into Switzerland, northern Italy remains pretty active, and the wet pattern continues eastwards through Austria, Slovenia, Croatia, and the Western Balkans into Greece. Much of that belt is again sitting around the 30 to 50 millimeter range, with some locally higher amounts. Southeastern Spain also becomes a more notable wet pocket in this period, with values locally in the 40s to 50s, while other parts of Iberia are more mixed and generally lighter. Italy remains broadly active from north to south, with the northern half and the Alpine adjacent areas standing out the most. The UK is still pretty unsettled, but they're not the wettest parts of the continent in this second 10-day window. Most of Ireland and the UK are running around 20 to 30 millimeters. Northern Europe and kind of Eastern Europe again are kind of staying lighter once again. Scandinavia, the Norwegian coast, Poland, Belarus, Baltics, Western Russia, mostly in the high single digits to low teens. So the middle part of the forecast is reinforcing kind of the same contrast. Southern Europe keeps collecting some moderate rainfall amounts, while Eastern Europe continues to miss out. In the final 10-day period, this is April 9th to April 18th, 2026, the pattern broadens a little, but it still favors that southern and south central precipitation pattern for Europe overall. One of the clearest wet zones now runs from eastern France into Switzerland, northern Italy, and Austria, where many of the totals are in the 35 to 50 mil range. The Balkans and Greece remain active, with many areas in the 30s to 40s and some spots even higher. The British Isles turn broadly wet again, especially Ireland, Western Britain, and kind of parts of Scotland, where the totals are pushing kind of into those low 30s. Iberia is mixed in much of this period. Much of Portugal and inland Spain stay lighter, often in the teens to low 20s, but eastern and southeastern Spain are doing better, with kind of spots in that 30 to 45 millimeter range. Eastern Europe still doesn't flip into the wet regime though at all. Poland, Belarus, Baltics, Western Russia are all kind of remaining modest, commonly in the 10 to 20 millimeter range. So even by the end of the forecast, the East never really catches up at all. This matters because it means that the monthly outcome is being driven by consistency, not by one isolated event. When all three periods are combined, the 30-day total precipitation pattern is clear. The wettest parts of Europe are western Norway, where the totals commonly reach between 120 and 180 millimeters, with some locally higher pockets. Western Scotland also seems pretty wet, between that 100 and 130 millimeter range. Another major wet corridor extends from the northeast of Spain and southeast France through Switzerland into northern Italy. Then the southeast into the Balkans and Greece. Across that belt, we're seeing 90 to 160 millimeter range, with the highest areas within kind of northern Italy, Slovenia, Croatia, and western Greece. Much of France, the UK, Germany, Central Europe are sitting in moderate ranges, 45 to 75 millimeters. The driest broad zones across northern and eastern Europe. Many parts of interior Scandinavia, the Baltics, Belarus, eastern Ukraine, totals are only around 25 to 45 millimeters. Now, the percentage of normal map shows us where the monthly pattern is actually unusual. The clearest dry signal is over Portugal and western Spain, where many areas are around 40 to 70% of normal, with a couple pockets that are even lower. Another broad below normal zones extends from the Baltics through Belarus and other parts of Eastern Europe, where values are around 75 to 80% of normal. By contrast, much of Southern Europe and Southeast Europe come near or above normal, especially for Eastern Spain, into parts of Southern France and the Alpine region, Northern Italy, Adriatic side of the Balkans, Southern Italy, Greece, and parts of the Central Mediterranean. In those wetter favored areas, values commonly reach around 120 to 150% of normal, with some localized areas kind of even higher. The main anomaly pattern is not just a simple wet west, dry east split, it's more specific than that. The strongest dryness is focused on kind of western Iberia, Eastern Europe, while the Mediterranean facing south and Alpine belt are the areas most consistently running wetter than normal. So what is the context and the implications here? The pattern matters because it points to repeated moisture delivery into the Alps, Italy, Balkans, and Greece. This is supportive of soil moisture and reservoir recharge, and in higher elevations, snowpack where temperature allows it. But it also raises the risk of repeated wet grounds, farming disruptions, localized runoff issues into those wetter southern corridors. Meanwhile, Eastern Europe is more concerning signal because that region is not just drier than Western Europe. It's running drier than what it would be seasonally. If that kind of pattern persists beyond the kind of the 30-day window, we're going to start to see implications for the early growing season moisture hydrology and long-term dryness concerns. So the headline is pretty straightforward here. The south is getting some repeated rains. The far northwest is characteristically wet. And the east is where a dry anomaly is sitting. If you like these videos and you want to see more, please subscribe to the Weather Mapping YouTube channel, and I'll see you on the next one. Laters.
Weathermapping.com